Okay, so you want to own a movie theater. The marquee out front with your name on the lease. Velvet seats. That smell of fresh popcorn hitting you the second the doors open. You imagine hosting the opening night of the biggest movie of the year. A packed house, people laughing and gasping together in the dark. You're not just running a business. You're running the place where this town makes its memories. That's the picture. That's the nostalgia everyone carries around from childhood. The one that makes people say they'd love to own a theater someday. The way they'd love to own a vineyard or a bookstore. Here's what that picture doesn't show you. On the single most important night of the year, the night the blockbuster you've been advertising for months finally opens, you might keep less than 20 cents of every dollar that comes through the box office. The other 80 cents already belongs to someone else before the lights even go down. Movie theaters are one of the most misunderstood businesses in America because everyone assumes the product is the movie. It is not. And by the end of this, you'll understand why theaters don't actually make money selling movies. They make money selling something else entirely. Something sitting right next to the box office the whole time. Before we talk numbers, we need to talk about what kind of theater we're even discussing, because movie theater covers at least three completely different businesses. There's the single-screen independent theater, usually an old restored building, running art house films, revival screenings, and local events, surviving on community goodwill and grant funding as much as ticket sales. There's the multiplex, 10 to 20 screens, the mall-adjacent chain model most people picture, built entirely around volume and turnover. And there's the luxury dine-in chain, reclining leather seats, in-seat food service, a full bar, premium pricing, a completely different cost and revenue structure stacked on top of the same basic idea of a dark room and a screen. These are not the same business wearing a different sign. A single-screen indie theater and a 20-screen luxury multiplex both sell movie tickets, but one is closer to a community nonprofit with a cash register, and the other is closer to a hospitality company that happens to also project film. This script focuses primarily on the multiplex model, the one most people picture when they imagine owning a theater, while touching on where the other models fit in along the way. Let's start with the number that sounds manageable and then stops sounding manageable. Building a modern multiplex from scratch, land, construction, seating, projection systems, sound systems, and HVAC big enough to keep a dozen packed auditoriums cool at once can run anywhere from $4 million for a modest regional build to well over $20 million for a large format flagship location in a major metro market. Buying an existing theater is usually cheaper upfront, but you inherit whatever condition the equipment is in. And digital projectors and sound systems have a shelf life measured in years, not decades. A single digital projector, the kind capable of screening a first-run release at full studio-required quality, costs between $60,000 and $120,000 per screen. A 12-screen multiplex needs 12 of those, minimum, before you even consider a premium large-format auditorium. Do the math, and projection alone can run over $1 million before you've sold a single ticket. Add one of those signature premium large format screens, the kind chains now brand and market as their flagship experience, and a single one of those auditoriums with its oversized screen and specialized sound system can run another $2 to $3 million on its own. Now the seats. A theater isn't just a dark room. It's a room engineered for comfort at scale. And comfort has a price tag. Standard fixed theater seating runs $300 to $800 per seat installed. Reclining luxury seating, the kind chains now use across the board to justify higher ticket prices, runs $1,500 to $3,000 per seat, largely because reclining seats take up more floor space, which means fewer seats per auditorium, which means the theater needs each seat to earn more just to break even on the square footage. A 12-screen multiplex with an average of 150 seats per auditorium is 1,800 seats total. At luxury pricing, that's somewhere between $2.7 and $5.4 million just to sit people down. Add commercial HVAC systems sized to cool a dozen packed rooms simultaneously, industrial concession equipment, popcorn poppers, soda fountains, digital menu boards, point-of-sale systems wired into every register and kiosk, and a modern multiplex build-out easily clears $8 to $12 million in infrastructure before you've licensed a single film to show anyone. Here's where it gets strange, because the thing you'd assume is the core asset of a movie theater, the movies themselves, isn't something you buy. It's something you rent, on terms the studio controls almost entirely. When a theater wants to show a new release, it signs what's called a film licensing agreement with the distributor, negotiated title by title, sometimes theater by theater. On a major blockbuster's opening week, the studio typically takes somewhere between 60 and 70% of box office revenue. Sometimes on the biggest releases, in their first weekend, that split can push even higher, especially for the films the studio has spent the most on producing and marketing and has the most riding on. As the weeks go by and the movie's drawing power fades, the split gradually shifts back toward the theater, maybe 50-50 by week 3, 60-40 in the theater's favor by week 5 or 6. But by then, the crowds have thinned out considerably, and there's a new blockbuster taking the good screens and the good showtimes. The theater is essentially renting its most valuable real estate, the biggest auditorium at the best showtime on a Friday night, to the studio, on the studio's terms, and getting paid the least exactly when demand and attendance are at their highest. This is the part almost nobody outside the industry knows. On a $200,000 opening weekend for a major release, playing across your 12 screens at multiple showtimes a day, the theater might keep somewhere around $40,000 to $60,000 of that after the studio split. Out of that, you're paying staff for every shift, utilities running around the clock, insurance, and loan service on the million-dollar-plus equipment that made the screening possible in the first place. Ticket sales alone, on the single biggest weekend of the year, barely cover the lights, let alone generate the kind of profit that makes an 8-figure build-out worthwhile. So how does anyone make money running a theater? Concessions. This is the callback you'll hear again before this video is over. The movie is the bait. The popcorn is the business. A large popcorn that costs a theater somewhere around 80 cents in raw ingredients, corn, oil, salt, the bag, sells for $8 to $11, depending on the market. A fountain soda that costs pennies per cup in syrup and carbonation sells for $6 or $7. Theater concessions typically run gross margins of 85 to 90%, numbers that would make almost any other retail category jealous, numbers that grocery stores and restaurants can only dream about. And unlike box office revenue, none of that money is split with a studio. Every single dollar spent on popcorn and soda belongs entirely to the theater, start to finish. Industry estimates suggest concessions can account for over 40% of a theater's total profit, despite representing a much smaller share of total revenue than ticket sales. The movie fills the seats. The popcorn pays the bills. That's not a joke. That's the actual structural logic the entire industry is built on. But daily costs don't care whether it's a blockbuster weekend or a quiet Tuesday in February. Rent or mortgage on a large format retail building runs every single month, regardless of attendance, whether the parking lot is full or nearly empty. Staffing, ushers, concession workers, projectionists, box office clerks, managers has to be scheduled for every showtime, whether the auditorium is full or sitting at 12 people scattered across 150 seats. Utilities for a building running HVAC across a dozen large rooms, 7 days a week, often 14 or more hours a day, add up fast, often $20,000 to $40,000 a month for a mid-sized multiplex. Insurance, equipment maintenance contracts on those million-dollar projectors and sound systems, and film booking fees all show up on the calendar, whether or not the weekend delivers a hit. Revenue, meanwhile, is brutally lumpy in a way few other retail businesses experience. A single strong opening weekend for the right film can generate more revenue than the following 3 quiet weeks combined. The entire industry effectively bets its year on a release calendar it doesn't control, built by studios optimizing release dates for their own slate and their own competition avoidance, not your specific theater's cash flow needs. And when that release calendar goes wrong, theaters don't just have a bad month, they can collapse entirely.
Regal Cinema's parent company filed for bankruptcy in 2023, closing dozens of underperforming locations across the country. A chain that had been operating for decades and was once one of the largest theater circuits in the world. The pattern behind closures like that is rarely one single cause. It's the same daily fixed costs grinding against an increasingly unpredictable release calendar, made worse by the pandemic-era gap in new content when productions shut down for months, and by the rise of shortened theatrical windows, where studios now release films to streaming just weeks after their theatrical debut, instead of the 90-day windows theaters used to count on and build their staffing schedules around. Every day a movie is available at home is a day fewer people feel urgency to go buy a ticket and drive to a theater. And that urgency, once lost, is very hard to manufacture back.
This is why the theaters that survive have quietly stopped thinking of themselves as movie theaters and started thinking of themselves as venues. Alcohol sales at theaters licensed to serve beer and wine carry the same high margins as concessions, with the added benefit of raising average spend per customer significantly, sometimes by several dollars per ticket. Private auditorium rentals for birthday parties, corporate screenings, watch parties for sporting events, and community meetings can generate several hundred to several $1,000s for a single booking with almost no additional cost beyond staffing an already scheduled shift. In-seat dining service at premium chains, full meals delivered to a recliner during the film, raises average ticket prices well above standard admission, sometimes doubling or tripling the total spend per visit. Advertising, those pre-show commercials and local business slides running before the trailers, is close to pure margin, sold directly to local advertisers or through a national ad network that handles the sales relationship for a cut. A theater running all of these secondary streams alongside a normal release calendar has a dramatically smoother cash flow than one relying on box office alone, because none of these revenue lines depend on which studio happened to have a hit this particular month. Let's build the two honest scenarios. The good year. A 12-screen multiplex lands 2 or 3 genuine blockbusters back-to-back over the summer, keeps attendance strong through the fall with a mix of family films and award season draws, and runs concessions hard on every single showing, upselling combos at the counter. Box office nets around $1.1 million after the split is taken out. Concessions, running at typical high-margin numbers across a strong attendance year, add another $800,000 in profit on top of that. Operating costs for the year, rent, staff, utilities, insurance, land somewhere around $1.4 million total. Net profit for the year lands around $500,000, a real healthy return on an $8 to $12 million build-out. The bad year, the summer slate underperforms. 2 expected blockbusters get delayed to the following year for reasons entirely outside the theater's control, and a labor strike in Hollywood shrinks the release calendar industry-wide for months. Box office revenue drops to $600,000 after the split. Concessions fall alongside attendance, down to $500,000. Operating costs stay fixed at $1.4 million, regardless of any of this, because rent doesn't care about the release calendar, and the utility company doesn't offer a discount for a slow year. Net result, a loss of roughly $300,000 in a year where nothing about the theater itself changed. The building, the seats, the staff, the projectors, all identical to the good year. Only the content calendar, something the theater never controlled in the first place, decided whether the year was a win or a loss. So, does owning a movie theater work as a business? It can, but only if you understand what you're actually running. You are not in the business of showing movies. You are in the business of getting people into a building and selling them everything around the movie once they're inside. The theater that treats the film as the whole product is the one that goes bankrupt when the release calendar has a bad year, the one that gets caught flat-footed every time a strike or a delay or a streaming shift hits. The theater that treats the film as an extremely effective, extremely expensive marketing tool for $11 popcorn is the one that survives a decade of confident predictions that theaters would be dead by now. The movie was never the business. The movie was the bait. The popcorn, the seat upgrade, the private rental, the beer at the bar in the lobby, that was always where the real money was sitting, right next to the box office, the entire time, waiting for you to notice it on your way to your seat.